Oh, my friends, you don't know how much this means to me right now, how good it feels inside to be here. Oh, I have so much to tell you, so much to share with you, my God. Bunnies eat radishes so they can make babies. You're welcome.
Wrestling with Wregret. Let's get it. Yeah.
Besides CM Punk and maybe Bret Hart, there haven't been too many wrestlers who've really dominated the conversation among fans quite like Bray Wyatt. From the moment he debuted his cult leader persona in 2013, fans were drawn in by the mystique, the intrigue, dare I say, the lore. Through 8 years of cryptic promos and drastic character evolution, fans went through an emotional roller coaster with Bray, witnessing some of the most interesting twists and turns along with some of the biggest crashes and burns, no pun intended. What might have been great ideas on paper came out not so great once they went through the Vince McMahon filter. Promising pushes fizzled out, unnecessary losses piled up, and character motivations became murky. And then when things couldn't get any more annoying, Bray was unceremoniously released from WWE last summer along with about 5 dozen other people, leaving many frustrated and wondering what might have been, perhaps none more than Wyatt himself. When Bray made his triumphant return at Extreme Rules this October, it was almost universally praised. Yes, most people were able to guess that he was at the other end of all those QR codes and mysterious messages, but the predictability of it didn't matter. The crowd's anticipation and eventual response to Bray's comeback, both in terms of cheers and dollars spent on merchandise, seems to prove the theory correct that Vince McMahon, scientifically speaking, didn't have a fucking clue what he had on his hands. Who knows whether or not things will turn out better than before, but considering all we've heard about the relationship between Bray and Vince, especially near the end of his first run, it can't be much worse. If Bray and his creative vision is allowed to succeed and thrive in this new Triple H-led era of WWE, then that would be great. But if he doesn't, well, perhaps this run can be added to the pile of other ideas, moments, and angles from his last run that didn't work out. And this week, I'm gonna rank them, the top 8 worst Bray Wyatt moments in WWE. Number 8, confronting The Rock at WrestleMania 32. By WrestleMania 32, a combination of poor creative and a rash of superstar injuries, including one to Bray himself, kept the Wyatt family from finding a place on the biggest show of the year. Guys like Randy Orton, John Cena, and Seth Rollins were all off the card. But you know who wasn't? The Rock. Dwayne Johnson has always been able to make history at the Showcase of the Immortals, though whether or not it's always been good history is a matter of taste.
When The Rock says yabba, the people say dabba.
After being introduced by the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders and setting his own name on fire for some reason, Rocky announced the attendance record for AT&T Stadium before being cut off by the Wyatts, no doubt with WrestleTix data in hand to dispute the numbers. Actually, that would have been entertaining, but what we got instead was another standard Bray promo, which The Rock immediately cut down in classic fashion before challenging the Wyatts to a match. Eric Rowan drew the short straw and handed The Rock a record-shattering victory at just 6 seconds. A legit 6 seconds this time, not the fate number purported for years between King Kong Bundy and SD Jones. A post-match beatdown saw a surprise appearance by John Cena, who helped the Great One dispatch the Wacky Wyatts. Despite Bray not taking the pin, it still positioned him and the rest of the Wyatt family as cannon fodder for stars of the past, which, as the theme of the whole night suggested, was perhaps Vince's worst booking crutch of all. Number 7, his feud with The Miz. At one point, Bray was known as the Eater of Worlds, but in 2019, it was more like the Eater of Faces. Baby faces, that is. We're gonna see a lot of him in this countdown, but let me just state for the record that I think The Fiend was a kick-ass gimmick, and that the split personality vibe between it and the Firefly Funhouse version of Bray had a lot of really cool and entertaining elements. But the gimmick was pushed to the top of the card way too fast, and once you start at the top, there's really nowhere else to go but down. And brother, nothing was down lower than having to feud with a babyface Miz. I've already talked on this channel about how terrible Mike Mizanin is at portraying a good guy because of how it contradicts everything his character is about. And when The Miz began fighting Bray over the honor of his mortal enemy Daniel Bryan, you knew things were already off the rails. Bray began making the A-lister's life hell, psychologically tormenting him and terrorizing his family in their own home. After a blisteringly quick build of 3 or so weeks, the stage was set for a match between The Miz and Bray Wyatt at TLC in December. Only it wasn't The Miz versus The Fiend, it was The Miz versus the kids show host. And even though it was at TLC, it was still a regular match. And on top of all that, it was also non-title. Oh, that's right, I forgot to mention, Bray was the Universal Champion at the time. If that all sounds bad, the match itself was even worse, as all Wyatt did was laugh and relish in the pain as he took Miz's offense for a few minutes before hitting two Sister Abbies to win. Quick question, if regular Bray already no-sells people's offense, why does The Fiend exist? Then, to really drive home how much of a filler feud this was, a bald Daniel Bryan came back to save the day and rescue The Miz from this horrible miscasting. Strangely enough, the recent twist that The Miz had hired Dexter Lumis to stalk him until he supposedly stopped kind of rescued the current angle from being too close to the one with Bray, but with the face and heel roles reversed. Number 6. The Swamp Fight. There are few battles more archetypal than that of teacher versus student, and what better way to muck up a classic winning formula than by literally dropping it in the muck. Braun Strowman debuted on television in the summer of 2015, bypassing the whole NXT phase and landing on the main roster as the newest member of the Wyatt family. Though rough around the edges, it didn't take long for Strowman to outgrow the group and become a huge star in his own right. But don't worry, WWE cocked that whole thing up too. At WrestleMania Pandemic in 2020, Strowman was a super last-minute replacement for Roman Reigns and beat Goldberg to win the Universal Championship. Goldberg had won the belt about a month earlier from, well, we'll get there soon enough. Braun emphatically disavowed Bray's influence by destroying his old black sheet mask in front of Wyatt, but Bray saved his old gimmick too and showed up soon after in his Waylon Mercy look. A match between the two was set for Extreme Rules at the home swamp of the Wyatts. Good to know Bray kept the mortgage up on the place even after moving to the Funhouse. While the Boneyard match and the Firefly Funhouse match a few months earlier set the standard for the cinematic match in WWE, it also opened a Pandora's box of crap for the rest of the year. The Swamp Fight, which was about 94% smoke and mirrors, had tricks such as Bray vanishing and reappearing a bunch, Braun fighting his own doppelganger, and even Bray using the whispers of a romance between Braun and Alexa Bliss, ending with Wyatt apparently drowning his former protege and re-emerging as The Fiend to close the show. But don't worry, Braun came back a week or two later as if nothing had happened. At least they had the good sense to subtitle this pay-per-view as The Horror Show. Number 5. Sister Abigail, version 1. On paper, a feud between Bray Wyatt and Finn Balor seems to write itself, but the first time they tried it, well, let's just say there were some problems. By August 2017, Bray was losing steam thanks to years of losing big matches and leaning on his gimmick alone to get his heat back. Balor, meanwhile, had yet to recover professionally after returning from the injury that cost him the Universal title. The two collided at that year's SummerSlam when Finn broke out the Demon King gimmick and beat the Eater of Worlds. Finn beat him again as himself the following month, which, call me crazy, shouldn't happen after he already assumed his final form. With the heel resoundingly defeated, the rubber match that really wasn't at TLC needed a little bit of magic. Bray sought backup from his family, but not in the form of Luke Harper, Eric Rowan, or even his actual sibling in Bo Dallas, but rather the mysterious Sister Abigail. Now, if you weren't a fan at the time, or you simply blocked it from your memory, it needs to be said that the mystery of Sister Abigail's identity made this one of the most exhausting periods to be a fan, as people endlessly speculated as to what the payoff would be. But instead of debuting or repackaging a female talent as Abigail, we got Bray himself in some bad makeup, a musty old net, and a voice modulator.
I taught him that darkness is so much stronger than the light, my sweet, innocent Bray.
Though I don't think Abigail as another one of Bray's personalities is inherently a bad idea, this particular execution stank to high heaven. It didn't help that part of Finn's rebuttal had him morph into the Demon again in front of an uncaring crowd, probably because they'd already seen him beat Bray as the Demon. But in a twist that either goes down as bad or good timing depending on your perspective, Bray fell victim to a wave of meningitis that hit the locker room hard and forced some big changes to the pay-per-view, which included Finn having a great match with AJ Styles instead. Almost makes you believe that magic is real. Number 4. The feud with John Cena. As 2014 began, Bray Wyatt had built a ton of momentum. After making his way up the babyface food chain, he set his sights on the man in WWE at the time, John Cena. After costing Cena the WWE Championship on more than one occasion, it seemed that Wyatt was poised for his crowning moment at WrestleMania 30 in New Orleans. While Cena had eaten up promising acts in the past, many folks thought that now was the time for him to use his equity to create a new final boss. Unfortunately, the company already had a final boss in Brock Lesnar, which meant that of course that wasn't going to happen. Wyatt and Cena's match at Mania saw the leader of the C Nation struggle not to submit to Bray's mind games. Despite using pretty much every tool at his disposal, Wyatt took the L, whiffing on what could have been a golden opportunity in the Big Easy. A rematch took place at Extreme Rules in a steel cage, which Bray actually won thanks to the tried and true tactic of ventriloquism. Folks, I have tried, but I cannot come up with a better joke about this than what the Attitude Era podcast already said about it that night. Far and away their best match of the series was their last man standing match at Payback the following month, and by this point the fans were overwhelmingly in support of Wyatt. But in the end, Cena won yet again, thanks to the now overdone finish of the loser being buried in a pile of symbolism. Even though he finally got his win back in the Firefly Funhouse match years later, Bray never really recovered from this feud in more ways than one. Not only was he permanently slotted just below the tippy tops of the company, but now he was doomed to have all his feuds bogged down with every sort of mystical smoke and mirror parlor trick you could think of. Number 3. Hell in a Cell vs. Seth Rollins, or How to Kill a Babyface in One Match. In a recent interview, Seth Rollins said that he found the Fiend character, not so much Bray the wrestler, incredibly hard to work with because of the no-selling aspect of the gimmick that Vince McMahon reportedly refused to budge on. But really, all he had to do was single out this one moment, say nothing after that, and we all would have gone, oh yeah, makes total sense. Rollins had a great moment at WrestleMania 35 when he beat Brock Lesnar in a shocker to win the Universal title. He then went on to have one of the most boring and miserable feuds of the year, a never-ending program with Baron Corbin that unfortunately brought his then-girlfriend Becky Lynch down with them. Seth needed a feud that would allow him to bounce back and prove how much of a star he could be, but instead, we got this. Boy, so much for Black and Brave, am I right, Remember earlier when I said that the Fiend suffered because he went to the top of the card way too quickly? Well, it wasn't just Bray's character that was hurt by it, but Seth's as well. After all, it's hard to get behind a babyface champion who shakes in his boots when a guy in a spooky mask breathes on him. It worked when he was a sniveling heel running from Kane 4 years earlier, but not here. There was still a chance to turn things around in their Hell in a Cell match in October 2019, one of the most unique iterations in history for all the wrong reasons. Not only was the cell painted red that year, it also took place under dark red lighting to really emphasize how scary it all was. Well, yeah, if you're scared by what you can't see, then sure it was scary. It's why John Cena is the ultimate horror villain. Am I right, Bray went full Jason Voorhees in this match, absorbing an assault of pedigrees, stomps, and even weapons. But all the ensuing kickouts killed the crowd, and Seth's whole moveset along with it. Ironically, it was a sledgehammer that proved to be the final nail in the coffin, as Seth's use of it caused the referee to stop the match. Yes, the same match that kept going when Mick Foley fell off and then through the cell in a matter of minutes was called off because Seth got a little too violent. Oh yeah, then Bray got up again anyway after the bell rang. Give me all the breaks. For giving fans nothing at the end of a long match they were already fed up with, it's rightfully been called one of the worst pay-per-view main events in WWE history, and it extinguished any remaining hopes Seth had of saving his title run. And as the final cherry on top, the Fiend ended up beating him for the belt a few weeks later in Saudi Arabia. But much like the no contest at Heck in a Sec, truly nobody was the winner here. Number 2. Goldberg, or How to Kill a Monster heel in One Match. Okay, so Hell in a Cell debacle aside, The Fiend was still booked really strong, and he did win the Universal Championship, so logic dictates he'd be there to put over a star that could define a generation. I meant a future generation. After spending nearly a year totally no-selling the offense of guys like Finn Balor, Seth Rollins, The Miz, and Daniel Bryan, in the end the Fiend went down like a ton of bricks to the hands of 54-year-old Bill Goldberg, who coincidentally wrestles like a ton of bricks. This Saudi squash match for the Universal title was embarrassing on its own, but it's even worse when you consider how many months of booking it upended in only 3 minutes. But hey, at least that meant we were going to get that epic spear versus spear match with Goldberg and Roman Reigns at Oh, never mind. Before I reveal the worst of the worst, here are 2 honorable mentions. The Deleters of Worlds. When the Hardy Boys returned to WWE in 2017, it was only a matter of time when Matt would bring out the broken gimmick that raised his stock so much that it got him and Jeff hired back in the first place. The problem was there was already another creepy interdimensional gimmick running around that was meant to be taken seriously. In the fall of that year, Bray beat Matt in a match, causing him to become woken Matt Hardy, because by this point, losing a match to Bray Wyatt of all people was enough to drive anyone crazy. For whatever reason, the feud mostly revolved around whose laugh was better. The program peaked with the Ultimate Deletion match at the Hardy compound in March of 2018, easily the least inspired of all the fights there over the years until Matt's match with Sammy Guevara 2 years later. Bray lost the match after falling into the Lake of Reincarnation, disappearing until he re-emerged at WrestleMania 34 to help Matt win the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. The two would become a team and even win the Raw tag titles before losing them in their first defense against Bo Dallas and Curtis Axel and eventually splitting up. At least we got to see Bray nearly break character at the sight of his own brother doing a dead-on impersonation of him.
We are destined to dance in the shadow and float on through space and time.
Doorknobs. Hey, he wasn't always good at promos.
Doorknob. Well, I used the doorknob to get in here, huh?
And my pick for the #1 worst Bray Wyatt moment in WWE is Randy. There are some rivalries that can define wrestlers. Hogan and Andre, Shawn and Bret, Flair and Dusty, Rock and Austin, Steen and Generico, Tully and Magnum, and then there's this decade-long, obscenely one-sided affair that could have been an awesome feud between two third-generation stars, but instead has become Bray Wyatt's kryptonite. Though this feud as we know it officially got its start in late 2016, it's worth pointing out that technically it's been brewing since all the way back in 2011, when Randy Orton punted Husky Harris and the rest of the new Nexus off TV before WrestleMania 26. It was such an effective move on Harris, he didn't come back to TV for 2 years. But anyway, back to the main part of the feud. Orton and Wyatt began clashing with each other soon after the draft of 2016. At the revived Backlash pay-per-view, Bray took Randy out before their match and won by forfeit, only for Kane to take Orton's spot, then for Randy to come back out and cost Bray the match, because God forbid we get some consistency here. The rematch saw Luke Harper return to the fold, and soon enough, Randy himself succumbed and joined the Wyatt family as well. Bray and Orton were dominant as a team, winning the Survivor Series match for SmackDown and also winning the brand's tag titles that December. Harper warned Bray that Orton was up to no good, only for him to be expelled from the group as Randy would go on to win the Royal Rumble and Bray the WWE title 1 month later. In fairness, the first half of this storyline felt a lot more natural and less predictable than other title feuds. But then it all went up in flames, literally, as the Viper proved Luke's instincts correct when he burned the Wyatt compound to the ground. Bray saw this and erupted in grief, that bad ol' heel. The first mistake they made from this point on was not including Harper in the title match at Mania, but fine, we get the one-on-one match, we get a lot of creepy crawlies put on the screen for kayfabe reasons I can't even begin to fathom, and as per the norm for Bray's career, still failed to win the match. Then the Jinder Project got underway, meaning Bray never really got another crack at the gold. He got his rematch with Orton, but instead made non-title House of Horrors match at Payback, though it looked more like a House of Foreclosures. It was a pre-pandemic cinematic affair that saw Orton survive being crushed by a refrigerator and somehow make it back to the arena at the same time as Bray did to beat him once again. I mean, damn, just let him have this for once.
But wait! There's more!
Fast forward to October of 2020. Bray Wyatt was out for revenge on Orton, though the family dynamic had changed. This time, The Fiend had Alexa Bliss by his side, who honestly did more legwork in this part of the program than Bray did. This time, they indulged in even more fancy production tricks permissible by the lack of fans in attendance. We saw Bray morph into The Fiend in Randy's very arms, then burst from a trunk Orton had set on fire. It all led to the infamous Firefly Inferno match at TLC, which in the end saw Orton set a dummy purported to be The Fiend ablaze. I've heard of burying somebody, but burning them? With The Fiend apparently dead or something, Alexa was left as his proxy to feud with the Apex Predator. She would dare Orton to set her on fire, make him puke black goo, even throw a fireball on his face, forcing him to wear a protective mask for all of a week. Seriously though, how did Big Hoss McGraw not sue over this? Things turned a corner at Fastlane when a match between Orton and Alexa ended with the return of Crisp E. Fiend, giving an entire generation of horny weirdos an image they can cherish forever. Then came WrestleMania. In one of the weirdest endings to perhaps the weirdest feud of all time, The Fiend emerged from a Jack-in-the-Box in non-melted form to have a middling 5-minute match with Orton, before Bliss herself emerged from the box wearing a crown that leaked more black goo. This distraction allowed Orton to hit a single RKO and win the match, and it went over like a fart in church. Alexa and Bray each gave a little statement on Raw the next night, and Bray never came back to TV again until his return at Extreme Rules 22. I guess they figured if they made everything weird enough, they'd get by without a lot of exposition. For being painfully one-sided and yes, a bit too creative for its own good, the long-running Bray Wyatt-Randy Orton saga is my pick for the worst of Bray Wyatt in WWE. But hey, I'm optimistic that things can only improve now that he's back with the company under new management. What else do you think belongs in this list? Let me know in the comments section below, and of course, don't forget to subscribe. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.